And your O365 message center, there's probably been about a couple of hundred new updates since July, but we want to take a few just of the most important ones and highlight them here. So the first one that was announced, which I think is the very coolest update that we have this month, is that there's a new feature coming to Yammer that's called a question and answer capability, where people could actually vote and mark on the best answer to a given question and have that be highlighted and appear at the very top. So very similar to how Stack Overflow does it, or and others, even the Microsoft message boards. So I'm pretty excited for this. I think this could, spark some new life into Yammer, especially for companies that are failing to see much of a difference between Yammer and Teams. The next is a neat feature being rolled out to help optimize video playback. So although Stream remains the best platform for you to host your videos and get all of the nice bells and whistles, a lot of people are still storing videos in SharePoint and OneDrive. In many cases, it might just be easier, or it might be something that doesn't warrant its own stream channel or group. So with that, Microsoft is deciding to optimize that playback experience, and they're starting to take advantage of their content delivery network, their CDN, so that when people go to play a video, it actually serves it up from the nearest endpoint to them. So pretty cool feature. There's nothing that you have to do here. You'll just automatically get those optimizations. Another neat feature is the ability to move files and keep sharing. So we all have probably shared files before and then move them into a different folder or a different site, and the sharing sometimes breaks. Definitely breaks if you move it to a new site. So Microsoft is introducing this new feature where if you use the UI to move a file, you have the ability at the bottom here to do a new checkbox that says keep sharing with the same people. So after it moves it, it'll basically maintain the shareable link that was initially created. So this is starting to roll out just about now, and it should be completed by the end of September. Another pretty neat feature is centralized management for hub visitor permissions. So for those that have built an intranet on SharePoint Online, chances are you're using a hub site, and chances are you have to set everyone to have access as a visitor to every site within that hub. So there's a new feature rolling out to make that simpler. Previously, you had to manage permissions on a site-by-site basis. Now you'd have the ability to also set up a viewer group that can be applied to all sites that are part of your hub. You don't have to, but it's a new option that is available to you. So this should be complete by the end of September as well. Next is the ability to merge Teams calls. So if you ever have multiple calls that are happening in parallel, or you have multiple things that are on hold because you're answering a different one, you now have this ability, or you will have the ability very soon to be able to merge two calls. So you would click on the dots, the three dots within your one call, select merge, and then on this follow-up screen, you would be asked to which call you'd like to merge them into. So pretty neat feature, especially if you're double or triple booked throughout the day, like many of us are. We do have a question in the chat about, I think, the previous feature. Robert asks, is that moving and sharing include moving files on your synced OneDrive on your desktop? That's a great question. Based on the current announcement, this seems like it's initially just in the browser. But as we know, a lot of these sharing capabilities that are in the browser make it to the OneDrive client as well. So I think this would be interesting to keep an eye on once this becomes rolled out. So jumping back to where we were. So another part is that if you're managing a Mac OS environment and you have been deploying Teams using DMG files, DMGs are the EXE equivalents of the Mac world. Microsoft is retiring that distribution mechanism, and instead they have the PKG files, which are the new formats for distribution. So if you are using that, that is going away in about a month or so. So definitely take a look and clean that up. Another announcement that we have is, we've all heard about the announcement with Microsoft lists, and that should be rolling out fairly soon. There's also a new list app that you can add as a tab directly within Microsoft Teams. And that's also starting to roll out in a couple of weeks and should be complete by the middle of October. So that kind of summarizes our key highlights for the last month. If you have more highlights you'd like to share, please hold on to them until the very end. We do have an open to discussion where we could talk about things like that. We would like to thank the company that I work for, Turn Digital, for sponsoring this event. It helps keep the lights on, pay the bills, and keep our minimum overhead costs from having to dip into our pockets. So with that all being said, this brings us to our main event. And we have a great session planned by David Feldman here, friend of the user group. And the session is really no code and lots of fun, compelling business solutions with Office 365. So with that being said, Dave, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for coming out to hang out and spend a little bit of time talking about building business solutions on Office 365. Tell me if you guys can see my screen all right.
Yes, it's very pretty.
Yes.
Looks good.
Thank you so much. Excellent. So I want to kind of talk about a few different things today. Really understanding all of the different ways that you can customize modern SharePoint. Thinking about there's 50 different ways we can do it, right? And in the past, a lot of us used things like the script editor web part to copy and paste stuff into classic sites. You know, when I'm looking in the modern world and I want to find a way to be able to build a customization, understand the outcomes I'm trying to achieve for the business, and then find the easiest way to go do it without a lot of work. Above all, I want to be able to give people a bunch of different tools. And I think a lot of these you've seen before, but maybe not all of them, and maybe not all of them together, or thinking about how you can put them together in order to build some cool solutions. So that's kind of what I want to do today, is walk through every customization option that I could think of. And we'll talk about the ones from absolutely no code to the ones that have code at the end, but we're not going to go into any detail on those at all, other than the fact that they exist. So if you needed them for something to go beyond something, you don't get stuck. Nothing that we're looking at today is really a dead end. And you can put all of them together, whether it be inside a SharePoint site, whether it be as tabs within Teams. So I wanted to really just kind of cover a really broad look at a lot of different things. And please feel free to interrupt and ask questions along the way, and we can go off and poke out or demo any individual pieces that you guys have questions about. So as I said, there are a million different things that you can do inside Office 365 to customize things. So I like to think about it as a continuum, from the most simple all the way on the left, out of the box, things that you can do, then things that require a little bit of configuration, a little bit of understanding of how the pieces work in order to go do it. Then things start to get a little bit more complicated. You can bring in some stuff that other people have written to be able to make it easy for you to be able to do stuff. Some of those are things like from SharePoint patterns and practices. And then all the way on the far side is the stuff we're not going to talk about at all today, of like what you do with code, you know, building your own web parts and full page apps and banners and app customizers. And I can show you what that stuff looks like, but I don't want to focus on that at all, because that takes a lot more effort to go do. And the more we can solve a business problem with the stuff, you know, to the left, the less time we're going to spend doing it, and faster we're going to, you know, get to move on to the next thing and bring a bunch of value to the business. Does that sound like a reasonable approach?
Sounds good.
Awesome. And for me, I actually come back to this just because it gives me so many different things in a lot of different places. So we'll start with out of the box, things that I can do 100% natively out of the box. And I start with this first one because a lot of people haven't seen or don't know the difference between the two different types of theming that you can do inside Office 365. And my animation wants to go back and forth between them. So we'll talk about them. So the first one is a theme at the Office 365 level, and that's really putting a custom color on the suite bar and a logo and making that clickable. And I'll show you what that looks like. And the second one is a theme that lives inside your SharePoint site, and you can build those out and have them take on your company brand and your company colors. So just to sort of point out the difference between the two of those really, really fast. And if anyone hasn't seen these are pretty cool. So this is the Office 365 theme. And what's great about it is that it lives across every app. So if I'm in Outlook, if I am, in anywhere inside the suite, if I'm in OneDrive, I'm going to always have my company logo here. And when I click on it, it's going to bring me back to my company homepage. The second one, just to look at it very briefly, if I go and grab another site that I've got some more rights on, I can go inside here and I can pop up my palette of different themes under change the look. And I can see all of the different themes that I can choose from. And as soon as I go and change it, it will go through, and you can see like the button as an example got recolored. Certain highlights inside it. If I had a hero at the top, you'd see it in a couple different places inside here. But two different sets of themes. So kind of talking about where each of these gets applied. So the first one, Office 365 themes, is in the Admin Center under Settings, Org Settings, Organizational Profile, Custom Themes. And I put this in here because no one can ever find it. And I always have people asking me, how do I get to that in order to go do it? And the second one is right in Change the Look on your SharePoint site. But the trick is, how do you get them in there? So there's actually two different theme builders. So I want to kind of talk about the differences between them. The top one is that theme generator, which is really simple. You choose a primary theme color, a body text color, a background color, and it will go and generate a bunch of different color codes for you in a giant JSON file or in a script that you can run against PowerShell. The second one is a little bit more complex to use, but you can see it does a bunch of accessibility checks inside it, and that's the Fluent UI Theme Designer. So the Fluent UI Theme Designer is a little bit newer. The SharePoint theme generator is kind of the classic one. They both basically do the same thing. They both generate something that looks like this, where you get a theme palette with a bunch of colors. You could override these yourself if you want to. It just makes it really easy to go off and generate all of them. And then a single line of PowerShell to add SPO theme, give it a name, pass in the variable with the palette. And if it's a dark theme rather than a light theme, then you set the as inverted, just so it can adjust things automatically knowing that. Any questions on those?
Actually, yes. Yes, there is.
Sure.
Christine Gulick has asked if a theme is applied from the lookbook, does it overwrite any changes to the themes applied from the Admin Center, like the logo, etc.?
If a theme is applied from a lookbook, if it comes out of the SharePoint lookbook, then you are talking about a SharePoint theme rather than an Office 365 theme. So this Office 365 theme is literally just going to be that sort of clickable logo in the sweep bar and your nav bar color. So they're kind of two different levels of scope. The Admin Center goes everywhere. When you're adding these themes that we're creating here, you're making them available to every single site in your entire tenant. So any site can now take advantage of them. So think of these as, grab all of your company brand colors, make the themes that make sense, and then people can apply them as appropriate to individual sites. But they cover different territories. So your lookbook themes are going to be like the SharePoint Online themes.
Awesome. Christine got an aha moment in thanking you.
Yes, excellent. Good. I'm glad. This is why I always start with these, because colors are one of the most fundamental things that people care about. And when people start building their business solutions, very often they're attached to the branding side of it. So I try to make sure we kind of cover a little bit of that. The next one, again, kind of a simple place to start, hub sites. I'm going to turn off my animation real quick because for some reason, I don't want to keep doing that. Let's try that and see if that's better. So I've had a bunch of solutions that we've done where people used to think about subsites, and they used to think about all of the different connected pieces of the solution. So just again, to think about ways of bringing it together. If I've got a pretty big app and I've got a bunch of different focus areas or topic areas underneath it, think about a hub site as a good way to bring that together. If I have a lot of pages that exist inside there and I want to aggregate them up to the top, again, hub site is a nice way to bring it together, but probably my number one reason why I talk about these when I think about building business solutions is the unified search that goes across a hub site. So being able to search all of the sites that are connected to it. We've done a few of these where we've brought in like topical training guides, and you've got subsections of it for different topics or different processes, and each one of them is a separate site. You connect them all to a hub, and now you've got a way to be able to search across that entire solution that you're creating. Again, I know there's been deeper dives into hub sites, but I wanted to at least touch it and kind of talk about that. The next one, kind of talking about putting together any sort of solution in SharePoint, it's important that we talk about pages. So I want to, at the very top level, just talk about the model behind modern pages. We have pages, and then within a page we have sections, and then within a section we have web parts. So just to kind of focus on that vocabulary, some of the section layouts, I might have a 1-column layout, a 2-column layout, a 3-column layout. And then inside those column layouts, I'm putting a bunch of these different parts, text, images, file viewer, highlighted content, event web part, you know, whatever makes sense. But if I think about the canvas on which I'm composing these solutions, it's going to be made up of pages. Those pages will have sections, and then the sections will have web parts inside. Good so far?
So far, so good. No questions at this time.
Awesome. We'll keep building. So once I make those pages, I might want to save them as a template. So this is a really interesting example. I did a bunch of location sites and said, let's come up with a template for how we want all of them to look. They're all going to have a blob about a little blurb about that location. They're all going to have a title. They're all going to have the country that they're part of. They're going to have a little video on the right-hand side. Create whatever that layout is. I've also done this for like my guidance site where we do a lot of training on different topics inside Office 365. So we came up with each of those different services. Here's one for comp sites. Here's one for planner tasks. Here's one for all of those different things. And we lay it out a single time. We save that as a template and then have that as a reusable piece that I can use inside the solution that I'm doing. So these things are bound by a single site collection. So those page templates are not available across the entire tenant. But if you did have something where you needed to move them back and forth, it is possible to do that with a little bit of PowerShell. So if for some reason you wanted to do it, I threw this in the deck, and I'll tweet out the deck at the end of the session as well. But basically, we're just using PnP PowerShell to allow people to connect up to our site collection. We're going to allow people to customize pages, which will let me copy in the pages, because all of these basically live underneath site pages. So I can go through and I can copy all of the template files from my source over to my destination, and then I turn the ability to customize pages back off. So by default in a modern site, you can't copy pages in and out because you could have put some JavaScript or some bad stuff in there. So we basically turn off that security control, copy in the pages, and then turn that security control back on so we don't break anything. As I said, there's not an out-of-the-box way to do these, but if you do a bunch of effort to make up your page templates and you want to reuse them across everything, I want to make sure nothing's getting in your way and nothing's blocking you from being able to use that kind of great tool in multiple site collections without having to go recreate it yourself.
There is another question, Dave.
Woohoo! I'm mining for questions.
I know. You and I think a lot alike, and our style is the same. Question: is there a best practice for naming page templates, i.e., a naming convention?
I think honestly, you can kind of name them anything that you want to. So when I go and I look at these, let's just go over to. I've got a lovely test tenant over here, and I'm going to go and make a new page.
David, we're seeing, or I'm seeing anyway, a browser with mattress websites.
Really?
I'm not seeing what else you're doing.
I don't.
It seems as though David Ryan might have hijacked the screen share, Dave.
Oh, thank you. I'm like, I don't have a mattress website on my computer, so that's not my computer. Let me reshare. How about now?
Is shopping for mattresses.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
We're good now.
Looks good.
Awesome. So just to kind of talk about making a page template. So you can see these are the built-in templates that exist on this site. So I'm going to go and just start with a blank page, and we'll make one real quick. And I'll give it a name, and then we'll call this one. I have caps lock on. Location template. Location name. And I'm going to just go grab a beautiful image from our stock photos. And let's go find something location-y that looks like a location. Awesome. And I'm going to switch the view of the top to be a little bit prettier. Go with a nice big color block up there. And just to get the idea, we'll go add a couple sections inside here. I'm not going to do a ton, but we'll just go add a 2-column layout. And we will add some text over here, and we will add a highlighted content over there with most recent documents. Tell me about this location. About this location. So once I've published the page, one of the options I have right here is I could save this as a page template. And I'm going to do that right now. And it is now a page template. It has been saved. So I can give it a name right at the top. Location, page template. Perfect. So now when I go back to make a new page, you'll see my location page template is one of my options that I have that I can choose from. And obviously this is not the most beautiful or elegant template I could ever create, but let's go look and see what it actually did. So I'm going to, instead of viewing by author, I'm just going to look at all pages. And you can see it created a new folder in here called templates. And now I have a page inside here called location page templates. So behind the scenes, all we're doing is literally putting a page inside here. And that's why that PowerShell works. All we're doing is we're copying everything from the templates folder of this site into a different site that we enable people to copy pages from. So in terms of naming, do something that makes sense for you. They're all going to live inside a separate folder called templates anyway, where they're super accessible and easy to be able to go off and do. So when I go, let's go back to home and let's go actually consume that real quick.
Dave, questions are pouring in.
Sweet.
So let me know when you are ready.
I'm just going to make a quick one for Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Just to finish up that sort of concept and say, all right, there we go. So we are back on pages, and I'm going to again flip over to the all pages view, and you can see Washington, D.C. lives at the root, but my template lives underneath that templates folder. All right, let's take some questions.
All right. So can page templates be restricted by an Office 365 group as well?
Can page templates be restricted by as to who can use them?
I believe so. Christy, yeah, that's a yep.
Okay, so these are going to all live within a site collection. So whoever has rights to author pages on that site collection will be able to use those templates when they go off and do it. I guess interesting question. So one thing I haven't tried, and we could try it if you want to, is you could take away rights from someone being able to see a certain page that lives in this folder, and hypothetically security trimming should remove it and that person would not see the template. I haven't tried it, but just knowing that behind the scenes it's going off and it's going to respect the ACL on that page, that would be what I would try doing if you needed to somehow restrict someone from being able to use that template. And hypothetically it should work, but I haven't tried it.
Let's go even crazier then. Why not actually lock the entire template folder down to that Office 365 group, for example? And as far as moving it, PowerShell would be able to do it across the entire boards. But if you want to do it just a quick and dirty, couldn't you use the move functionality that comes with the library abilities of the modern library look UI to actually?
Yeah, so great question. Let's go take a look at it. So if I go and I say, I want to, so let's go see, I want to copy to as an example. So if I say copy to, notice that I am currently bound by this site collection and I can't get out of my site collection.
Interesting. So
that's the reason why I went. That's the reason why I went to do it. You can use ShareGate. You can use your tool of choice to go do it. The key is to turn off the no script site on your destination. Otherwise, you won't be able to copy the page and it will fail. So as long as you turn off that disable add or customize pages, I think is the name of it. Yeah, deny add and customize pages. So as long as you turn that off, making scripting enable, then you can copy the page in by your copy tool of choice. But unfortunately, the GUI for copying won't let me take a page and move it cross site collection.
Terrific.
Awesome. Other questions on this topic?
We've started a full-on debate about best practices and security here in the chat. So.
Oh, about the deny adding customized pages?
No. About doing item level security on the site pages library.
I mean, in all honesty, like your sites are going to be pretty granular. I mean, generally someone who has ability to author on a given site is going to have the ability to author on that site. In a flat architecture, you're going to want to have a lot of different sites, not just a couple site collections. I can tell you, I'm at 44,000 site collections right now inside my production tenant. So don't be afraid of having a lot of site collections. There's, I think, 880 com sites as of last week when I did my last count. So it's not bad to have granular sites. You can, connect them with security groups. You can, let content authors have rights over that boundary. If you need to move a template, you certainly can. But I mean, the example I would give you, just kind of jumping into these, is I'm going to jump to one, our help site. And I love demoing with this because there's absolutely nothing sensitive inside here. So this is kind of how we train people to use our intranet. So if I look at this, here's the communication related topics. These are my collaboration related topics, explore all topics, tips and best practices, productivity stuff, kind of the help community inside there. And this is authored by folks who work on the Office 365 and SharePoint intranet services. So by having that here, the people who have rights to author on this site have the ability to go off and author on the site. It makes it pretty straightforward. And you can see we have a service overview page and we have a help page template. So depending on what it is that I'm doing, you can see we have a highlighted content that pulls in related content. And on service overview page, we have a nice table. It's best for this, avoid using it for this. This is your governance guidelines. This is your training and guidance. These are the key roles on it. So what we try to do is be able to make it so that within the context of the site collection, when people are authoring, you're making it easier for them to do the right thing and create high quality content.
Another question came in from Greg. Basically, I think it's a question anyways, can be applied to both regular SharePoint sites or off 365 group created sites. I think what he's asking, is it possible to use it across the boards, or is it only for Office 365 group based site collections?
Yeah, so what we're talking about applies to site pages or modern pages inside SharePoint. So it will work in any modern SharePoint site that you are creating content in. Now, just one interesting thing. So that page template that you saw, from the home page of my site, when I hit page, you get this lovely authoring experience and a link to the templates folder. If I were to go into viewing all site contents and going over to the pages library, you do not get that beautiful experience. So it is not everywhere. It is not everywhere you want to be, but it is on the home page. So that's maybe a key thing to remember. So if I'm in site pages and I go do this and I click site page, now you're just going to get an ugly little site page and that's it. So you lose all of that goodness if you do it from here. So you can still save it as a template, but you don't get your lovely template picker unless you do it kind of from that gesture right here. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm glad we hit page templates. Are we good on these?
No more questions at this time.
Awesome. Lovely. So we're going to kind of move up the complexity ladder just a tiny bit. So I want to talk about Microsoft Lists. This is something that a lot of folks, I think, are excited about. Dimitri and I were having a conversation at the very beginning of these. These are exactly SharePoint lists. They are enhancing SharePoint lists. They are doing some work that I know they've been planning for probably at least a year and a half, if not 2 years, to bring a lot of additional goodness into SharePoint lists. But for anyone who's played with SharePoint lists, this will address some of the gaps that you've seen in the past. There is a new homepage for lists that is going to be rolling out shortly. It will have its own app launcher icon. It does not yet. Today, if you know the hidden URL, you may be able to get to it in your tenant, because a lot of folks have been finding it. It's basically going to OneDrive and swap the word OneDrive for lists, and you will probably find it in your tenant. But it's got a bunch of really cool stuff, and I want to talk about it because I think lists are really a great way to store and structure information. So I'm just going to go do that just so anyone can see this. So if I go to my OneDrive.
I've got another question here, Dave.
Go for it.
Is lists going to replace Planner? And if not, how do both fit into the Office 365 platform?
Yeah, great question. No, Lists is not going to replace Planner. I think Planner is closely aligned to To-Do and to Project and sort of that ecosystem around tasks and work management and aggregation of tasks from different structure. I think that you can think of lists as really being an information tracking and sharing. You could manage tasks in it. You can collect additional metadata, which is something that you can't do inside Planner today. But I think that they are fundamentally different apps. So there's not a plan that I've heard or that I've seen talked about either privately or publicly to say, hey, let's go smush those together. But yes, you can track information in both of them, just like I can store my file in OneDrive or in SharePoint or any of that. So I'm going to start out on OneDrive, and I'm going to use an S at the end of that just to go over and check out Lists Home. And so I can get over to Lists Home. And inside here, we're going to go and say, I want to make a new list. And I'm going to show you just a couple interesting examples. So maybe I'm going to go through and do a issue tracker as an example. And you can see if I go do that, it will give me a sample of this is what that list is going to look like. You've got a really nice sort of template picker. And I can see the different templates that exist right here. And I'm going to say, let's go use that template. And I'm going to give it a name. Now, one of the choices is where do you want to store it? So if I store it on my lists, it is storing it on my site, on my personal site that people used to call a my site, right? And now it's sort of the place where our OneDrive is stored. But if I just store it in my list, that's where it lives. Or I can choose a site that I am doing some work on, and I can say, let's go store it there, and I'll give it a bug icon, and I'm going to go say create, and it says, congratulations, I just made your new list. And it's literally that easy, and now I've got a nice modern SharePoint list sitting on my SharePoint site, and I can do anything that I want to do in terms of export to Excel, any sort of Power Automate stuff that I want to do on it, putting a custom Power App form on it, or just going through and saying, hey, let's go make some issues, right? So issue number 1, please get me an icon for lists. And I mean, these are rolling out. So there are definitely bugs that you will find if you go in to go play with it. I'm going to go assign this one to myself, to Dave Feldman. That sounds great. And I'll give myself, it was reported yesterday. And let's go see if that's good. Great. So some of the reason why I wanted to go put that in is you can see that out of the box, you get some nice column formatting. So for example, my status here has a nice color associated with it. So if I go let's go put ourselves in Quick Edit. And this is one of the other nice new things about Microsoft Lists. So it's a good evolution over where we were on the SharePoint version of Quick Edit. This is fantastic. And I'm going to choose a different, let's say that this is a low priority, and I'm going to give this one a status of completed, and let's just call that one good, and move up here. And you can see that completed has a different color coding on it. So one of the, let's go exit out of Quick Edit mode real quick. So one of the neat things that I can do inside here is you can format this column. So inside here, you can see I'm formatting my choices as pills. And if I wanted to, I could go through and I could even go into the advanced mode and I can see the lovely JSON that they have created. And I could go through, if this were a session on coding or writing JSON, you could look at all of that great stuff that you would have had to write in order to be able to create this. Or I can go back to design mode and make it really easy for someone to be able to go through and say, let's go say, instead of that, I'm going to make completed equal to red because completed is bad. And let's say blocked is good. And we'll just call it that way. And as soon as I do that, it's going to go through and you can see my colors all updated there. So I've got a lovely editor to be able to go do that without having to write any code. So hopefully that's something that's exciting and kind of fun for folks.
That's certainly better than messing with the formatting of lists currently with that box down below. Was it JSON, I believe?
Oh, it's so painful. So another thing I want to show you guys, I opened this already in another tab, I think. So there is a, maybe I didn't. Let's go open it right now. Open link. There is a lovely lookbook for lists. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. Let's go figure out which browser tab it opened in. Right here. So I strongly recommend checking this out and sharing this with everyone who you think might be interested in this in your company. But it's got a nice picture talking about List Home, talking about how these work inside teams. And again, this is showing you kind of a gallery view, and giving you lots of examples. Here's your schedule view that I think you were asking for, Dave, showing you what that looks like. You get the idea. So there's a huge number of good examples that you can use. This is worth grabbing a copy of it.
Would you mind actually grabbing that URL and throwing into the message of this meeting chat? I think a lot of people are foaming at the mouth right now.
Woohoo! Awesome. This is what we are trying to do, is just make it nice and easy for you guys to find some fun stuff. Awesome. So that is lists. And just to kind of cover these, we did these at a very high level. We looked at some of the column formatting, and again, you can use JSON to do it, or there's a nice GUI editor that'll handle 80 to 90% of the stuff you want to do. We showed that off real quick. Finally, there's also a way to do view formatting. So if you want to do something more than just one column, you can still do this in JSON. There's some great examples at this GitHub site. I can also paste that into it. People may not be foaming at the mouth for JSON as much, Dave. But what's pretty interesting is you can basically control the entire layout of this. So you can see this is a sample of a list item. Each one of these are items, and you can make up your own kind of custom cards on that if that's something that you are interested in doing. And again, it's not writing a lot of code. There's some great samples, and then you can kind of play with them and customize them. So I will, I'll put, oh, it looks like Christine actually pasted the exact same link in here. SP dev list formatting, yeah, maybe. Did you do the view? I think those were the samples for doing the column formatting. So now you've got both of them inside here. One for column formatting and one for view formatting. So if you want to do the entire list item and do a different design with it, versus if you just want to format an individual column within a list view. One other thing to call out that I think is really important, especially when we're talking about doing this for business solutions, is that if I go back to my list here that I formatted up, and let's go to our home page. I'm going to edit my page. And right at the top, I'm going to go add a list. And I'm going to go add our issue tracker that we just created. So the thing that I wanted to show you that I think is really important is that all of that formatting that you do shows up not only when you're viewing it inside the Lists app, when you're viewing it as a full page, but it also shows up inside the web part. So you get full fidelity to be able to access all of your kind of view customizations when you're adding this on a page as part of some composite, no code application that you want to put together. So really, really powerful to be able to group it together with a bunch of different stuff. Awesome. Good to keep going.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of tinkering around with this Microsoft Lists view. Somebody showed me how to change that URL a few days ago, and it's been a blast. I've been a little reluctant, though, to utilize some of the newer features. I'm curious, do you know if you modify an existing SharePoint list with some of those newer kind of capabilities of Microsoft Lists, will those functions be available just viewing it through the traditional like a com site like you have here?
Yeah.
Like
So
I know the JSON would work, but what about the other stuff like the little automation components that they've built in?
So give me an example. What's something that you're worried about? You're thinking about like the Power Automate on here, like the set reminder?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, are those creating full-fledged flows that just live in flow?
That's exactly what it's doing.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
okay, great.
This is literally all existing technology with a little bit of glue that kind of pieces it together in a nicer user experience. Plus
yeah.
really
So they just
nice,
built a wizard for building flows.
Yeah, that's exactly
That's
it.
great.
They just made it easy to do. Yeah, it's lovely. It really is a tremendous improvement in terms of being able to get access to these. The other one I want to kind of just hit real quick from here because I think it is really neat is I want to show the experience of building one of these from Excel. So if I go and I say I want to do this from Excel, and I'm going to go in for folks who know me, I just moved today. So I've been working on building a house for about a year, and I was tracking a list of all of the stuff, like 2 weeks ago that wasn't done on my house to get ready to be able to move today. So I had it all in Excel, and I said, you know what, this is kind of a pain. Let's go put it into a list since we're talking about lists. And so here's my example. Over here, I have my title. These are the actual tasks, like the basement floors need to be cleaned and protected. All right, so that's a choice field. Who's responsible for it? My best guess, that looks like a single line of text. My status, I'm going to turn into a choice field.
That's
and
awesome.
you can see that this is still a little bit buggy. Like I've got to scroll down to get to my right scroll bar. But I'm going to say don't import this one, and don't import this one, and don't import that date. And you can see, again, this is why we're not released quite yet, but it's getting pretty close. So I'm going to not import. I had done like a little flag in the Excel for like what week it was going to happen in, and I'm going to say I don't care about any of those. And my comments, that looks like a good multiple lines of text. And we hit next. It says, hey, where do you want to go put it? All right, I'm going to call this one finishing plans -demo. And we're going to give that a nice little paintbrush, and we'll save it to my OneDrive in my lists and hit create. And magic will happen behind the scenes. And while it's doing that, Julia Child will open the oven and pull out a absolutely delicious, fully baked turkey that I created about 13 hours ago when I went through and put this together. But it would look exactly like this as it gets imported. Then I went through and I did some formatting on my status field, and I said, let's go clean that one up. And if you wanted to, I added a plan date to it. You can add whatever other columns because it's just a SharePoint list. So there's nothing else to really go do here. And I mean, what's really nice is when I go and I create a new one, it correctly derived all of my different choice fields. So I'll give this one a title, do some stuff. And let's go see. Said, all right, this is going to be the painters are going to have something to go do. You get the idea. So all of the choice boxes all got correctly populated from Excel when it walked through that wizard to go through and grab all of my data. The other thing that I want to talk about that's pretty neat is this add attachments field. If I am using this list in SharePoint Mobile, it will let me take a photo. So as I'm going through and walking around the house finding stuff, I can be like, hey, there's a little nick on this window, and I can add attachment, take a picture of it, and now I have it all in one place and I can be able to go share it. So they've put a huge amount of work into Microsoft Lists, both in desktop, in the SharePoint mobile app. It works great as well. There is a Lists mobile app, I think, coming at some point in the future. But I mean, today, this works fantastically well. Any other questions around Lists? Are we good?
It looks like another one coming. So it populated our choices from your data? Question mark.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that great? When I went through that import from Excel, and it asked me to pick the different field types, when I went through and said it was a choice field, I'll go back and grab it again, just so we can see it. Here is my finishing plans. Next. It's this one right here. So when I go through and I say this one's my title, and instead of single line of text, I make that a choice box, and I make this one a choice box. By doing that, it's going to go through and make it so that it automatically grabs the distinct values and makes those the options inside the choice box. Really slick.
It makes it really quick to be able to populate a list.
It's so nice. It's so nice. That is one of my favorite upgrades inside here. Cool. Should we keep going?
I think there might be another question in the chat here. Hang on.
We'll hang out. We'll hang out. Yeah.
I'm looking. Oh, yeah, Daniel Karp asked one. Can you set permissions specifically for a list within lists rather than relying on the overall SP site permission as I believe it is now?
I don't believe that there is anything inside here. Well, let's go try the 3 dots. So I can share from here. Let's go see what that looks like. So if I bring up a sharing dialog, it looks like I can go through and I can create an edit link for it. I can do something like that, and it will notify them and grant access.
You've got another 3 dots off of that as well. Let's see what that does. Right next to
up here. Manage access. So this looks like it is whether it lives inside my OneDrive, whether it lives inside my SharePoint site. Let's see if I can do that on the SharePoint site or just on my OneDrive. It looks like I can do it on either one. Nope, not yet. Not yet. Oh, I may have deleted that one. It doesn't exist anymore. All right, fine. I think that the answer looks like you will eventually be able to do that through the share charm there. It's a great question.
Yeah, and Dave, if you go into the list and you click on the gear icon, you also have access to your traditional list settings, including permissions.
If I'm doing it from within list settings, is that what you're talking about?
Yep, and the permissions for list.
Yeah, this is still the old school page. I haven't modernized this guy yet. I'm hoping. I assume it will get modernized at some point. As I said, they're still working on this. I would expect new stuff to ship throughout the year, continuing to make this a better and better experience. All right. Hopefully, we've covered a lot of stuff on lists. It's a great area to go play with. Next two I want to talk about is Power Apps and Power Automate, individual flows. This is an interesting kind of fun one to think about. So the individual workflows are called flows. The tool that makes them is Power Automate. So Power Apps are the user interface side of it. So on top of any of my lists, I can go through and I can create, if this isn't a custom enough user experience for you, I can go through and I can do some other stuff inside here. And I want to talk about a couple examples on here. So one of them is that you can do things that trigger off of my SharePoint list, but I can also do things that put data into my SharePoint list. So one of the things I do a whole lot is create a Microsoft form that's anonymously accessible, where I can give that link out to someone and be able to put a bit.ly against it and hand someone that Microsoft form. They fill out 3 or 4 different fields, and then kick off a Power Automate flow from there. And it maybe have it go off and send an alert, drop it into a SharePoint list. I even do things where I add people into Azure AD groups automatically. Like, hey, have you completed the training for this? Yes, you have. Go notify them, send them some stuff, drop it in a list. Now I know that they're one of the people who are in there. Capture all the data there. So I want to call this out both from a dropping stuff into a list, but also from connecting all of the different things here. So I could say every time a new task gets added in my finishing plans, go and create a new task in Planner. And it's a good way to be able to glue all of these together. And for anyone who hasn't played with it, I'm not going to do a super deep dive into it, but you can see you've got a couple of easy starting points on here. Or if not, I can go through and I can create a custom flow from any one of these and be able to do a ton of different stuff, either from templates or from one that I want to go make myself. Same thing on Power Apps. If I want to create a great little mobile app that I can pin on the home screen of my phone and have it easy for someone to go off and enter new items in here, I can go through and create a Power App very, very simply from here and make it really easy for someone to be able to go do that. So one more way that I can add another kind of layer of customization on here. I think using the SharePoint list out of the box is faster and easier and slicker, but there's definitely boundaries on it. So if you get to the point where you want more control on it, and you want more lookups, and you want to be able to interact with other systems and say, go log a ServiceNow ticket when this happens, go, go send a complicated email that I compose, that does this, or an HTML email, and I place in some placeholders coming out of my data that they submit. Power Apps and Power Automate are fantastic ways to go off and do that. Good on this one? Any questions on this?
So far, so good. No questions on this particular part.
I think those have gotten a lot of press. Those have gotten a lot of sessions focused on deep diving into the two. I just want to call them out as part of the tool set we can use here. The other one that I think is kind of equally important is Power BI. And one of the reasons for it is just because it's really easy to go off and visualize that same data and then be able to embed a web part that gives me a look at what that data is going to look like right on my page. So if I go through, I can add a Power BI web part on here. And if I've got a Power BI report, super, super simple to go surface it. And I can even make a report that's based on the data inside one of my lists on the site and be able to have a nice visualization next to it. So another kind of nice piece, I've used this a lot of different times in creating these. Sometimes it visualizes data on the list on the site. Sometimes it might be some external data source providing external context around it as well. You can also have some fun drill through actions on here. So if you have a drill through action on your Power BI report, that's another neat way to be able to kind of dive into another piece of data. All right, that finishes up the stuff you can do with absolutely zero code that I wanted to deep dive on. So the rest of these I'm just going to kind of briefly mention as things that you can do, things to be aware of if you ever want to go deeper. So there are web parts that will let you create your own 100% custom template. So this is one that my team had done about 1.5 years ago, and we open sourced through PNP, where you can go through and you can create your own CSS, HTML, JavaScript if you want to. You can have your own basically handlebars template, and you can design any kind of user interface that you want to with a SharePoint list or a SharePoint search query. Another thing I want to call out is the concept of site designs. So think of this as the next level up from page templates. So you've got a bunch of different actions that can run when I go through and I create a new site. And I'll show you the example. There's a good way to do these using using out of the box and PNP stuff. So when I go through to SharePoint Home and I go to make a brand new site, and I say, let's go make a communication site. These are your site designs. So the top 3 are the out of the box ones. And then the bottom are custom site designs that we've gone through and published. So in this case, I have a location site that has a full template. It's got some standard images. It's got page templates associated with it. It's got a nav that's kind of pre-baked around it, a bunch of page content. So it comes with like 8 or 10 pages that we ship as part of it. These take more effort to go develop, or there are third-party ISV solutions that will let you kind of graphically design one as well. That's, other than demos, I use a third-party ISV product to make it, because it's a bunch of effort to go piece these together using PNP and JSON, but you can do it totally free using those pieces. And when you go create your site, it will run a bunch of different actions and go through and set it all up. You can join a hub, you can enable or disable external sharing, all sorts of good stuff. So just to kind of cover what's inside that, it is a big, ugly JSON file, just like the other stuff that we looked at, and a PowerShell command for add SPO site design with a name associated with it, and a preview image URL, and then it shows up on SharePoint Home so that you've got the ability to have people use that template anytime they want to. You can scope these and permission these, so only certain people have the ability to see them as well. So this is a list of all of the things that you can do inside that big, ugly JSON file if you wanted to. So some of those are settings, some of those are things that you might want to do inside SharePoint, like creating lists, adding fields, deleting fields, creating content types, even adding SharePoint framework extensions. So you can do all of those in a site design and then make it easy for people in your tenant to be able to go off and create those. Another one I want to hit on briefly, only because I think it's incredibly useful and I want people to be aware of it, is Patterns and Practices has released some tooling around site modernization. So the ability to automatically take a classic page and be able to create a modern page out of it. We went through and did this for literally thousands of legacy news pages. So we could retire like 70 classic publishing sites that were nothing other than old news. So we'd already built new intranet sites. We said, let's go through and do some PowerShell, and you can actually create a template that maps specific parts of your old publishing pages to new sections. Again, this is up the complexity wheel, but if you've got a bunch of classic stuff that needs to be part of your new solution, it's good to know that it exists so that you can go take a poke at that. And then finally, the scariest, deepest end of the pool, if anyone wants to go there. And again, I'm not going to go super deep into it. SharePoint framework extensions. So there's a couple different things. So one example is an app customizer, which basically lets you put something at the top or bottom of the page. This is a gigantic mega menu that my company implemented to be able to basically have what's almost an entire application running at the top of these. So please don't underestimate the complexity of coding these things, but they have the ability to be really cool. So I'll just show you one quick example of what that looks like if I jump in. And so inside here, I can, we have like a My Work tab that we've built that has like, some of my favorite sites in here. I can jump to my documents, my profile. I can be able to kind of browse different resources across the organization to go find a bunch of stuff. I even have a help site for Office 365 in here as an example. If I want to give people a quick jumping off point to how to go learn how to use the intranet. So this is a good example of an app customizer, a really complicated one probably. You can have field customizers that let you change the way a field looks within a list, or you can add a button onto a list or library to be able to go off and run some client-side code and go do some stuff. Just good things to be aware of. SharePoint Framework web parts. Again, this is a great way to extend and add new parts into your toolbox. Couple of good examples on here. This is a set of web parts that my team did about 1.5 years ago, and we are keeping them up to date on GitHub. They're part of PNP right now. They kind of predated Quick Links getting as cool as it is. Right now, I'd say that the handlebars template is probably the most useful of them. The rest, you can do most of it inside the out-of-the-box Quick Links, but it's a good example if you want to go look at a custom web part and kind of how to do some of the custom plumbing behind it if anyone wanted to do that. finally, the last kind of piece I wanted to call out inside here is a single part app page. So in this case, I have a single web part that you can see full screen covers the entire page, and it gets rid of a bunch of the Chrome and makes it so that I've got a full screen experience. If you think about things like Delve as an example, or things like Planner, where you don't want all of the SharePoint stuff around it because you're creating some custom application that you want to be there, that's something else that you can go off just to know that it exists. Classic add-ins still exist. I don't use them a whole lot anymore, but they exist. And then finally, you could go off and call APIs and build some custom app entirely out of SharePoint if you really had some need where you wanted to go call in and do a bunch of stuff, either calling Graph APIs or SharePoint APIs. So I think that really covers the entire realm of every way to customize SharePoint that I could think of. And, you know, my big sort of call out on here, I want to go to the kind of first slide at the very beginning where we hit the continuum. Is that the further you are to the left, the faster you're done, the quicker you can add a ton of value for the business, but it's good to sort of be aware of all of these. So I think everything we demoed falls into this kind of no code realm where you can create a huge amount of value really, really fast. And hopefully it was helpful seeing all these come together.
So there's a bevy of information being pumped into the message. Someone said something about, I think, Office Graph as well. I believe. Hold on. Let me. It's loading, so I got to scroll back up now.
Cool.
Let's see. MS Graph could be another session. Oh, okay, so they're not equating it to the look and feel. That would be. I was kind of off. Okay, there is one from Sarah, and that is there a way to automatically filter a Power BI report based on who is accessing it in the SharePoint site?
I think the answer is it depends. You can do row level security using DAX. So DAX is kind of the, it's almost like an Excel kind of like language. So you have the ability to implement row level security inside Power BI. So if that's implemented in your model, you can get the logged in user and you can be able to do some fun stuff to go do that. There's not a, I'll say, easy out of the box way to respect item level permissions on a SharePoint list or something like that. So yes and no. Yes, it is possible to do, but you'll need to roll your own in terms of what that row level security is. It's not going to automatically know what your data source is because it's a fully decoupled in-memory copy of all of your data. It's not in real time going back and hitting SharePoint to look at what your list item permissions are. But yes, it's possible.
Enhancement, not secure. Oh, for an enhancement. So it's not so much for security perspective, but for enhancement. I'm starting to having flashbacks to audiences in SharePoint. But
you mean modern audience targeting?
Yes. Is that a thing? Is that a thing? That is a thing. So
yeah,
okay,
it's been rolled out.
It has been rolled out.
Yep.
So Sarah, okay, and because I didn't realize it was rolled out, Mike and Dave definitely wanted you to talk into this. Sarah, just to give you a really high level, back in the day with SharePoint 2010, I believe it was released, you would be able to have like web parts target specific audiences, and the audience could be created in the back end of SharePoint. This is all on-prem. This wasn't so much cloud at the time, but BPOS was there. But it sounds like they've modernized the audience experience. So if Mike, you and Dave could kind of chime in on that, because that does actually fall in this category of look and feel and no code. That would definitely be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, let me put a good link on here for you. So unlike classic audience targeting that was basically at a web part level, think of this as I am targeting pages and navigation. So for an individual page or for an individual piece of navigation, I can go through and you get a little icon that tells you that this particular item in the nav is audience targeted, and you can basically target these to different groups. So certain web parts respect these, like the news web part, as an example. If I were to go, let me flip back to my site and go add a lovely news web part to the top of my page. I did not mean to hit Control N.
I guess you're my minion. I'm known as Captain Click. You can ask anyone from the Staples team that I like to push buttons way too much.
So you can see right there, and it gives you a lovely link to the exact same article. You can enable audience targeting on this. So it's literally a flip switch on, and it's going to now basically show you pages that are targeted toward you, or take out things that are not targeted toward you. So you have the ability within news to be able to do it, and I believe within highlighted content as well, although I haven't checked that since this feature rolled out, because it's not one that I'm using today. But let's go, we can go try and see if it's there.
So while you're doing the trying, the question is, can we target to AD groups, or is it to only M365 groups? I know back in the day you could have Active Directory groups, but I haven't played with the modern one as much.
Right, so it's not going to be on-prem. Everything's going to have to live in Azure AD.
There you go. So technically, yes, you could do Active Directory groups, Deb. However, you have to make sure it's in Azure.
Cool.
Cool. A good bunny trail to go down, to be sure.
And let me also grab this audience targeting link and make sure I place that into the chat window for folks as well, so that we have it.
That would be terrific.
Your groups are not cross-functional yet. Yes.
So I've got one for you, Dave.
Yes, sir.
When you were talking about templates, I've also recently been playing with a lot of those templates. I have a customer request for having those templates basically be automatically generated based on fields that were filled out using Microsoft Forms.
Having templates generated. So sure. So it is 100% possible. I will tell you it is not easy. So I'm going to give you an example from my work world, because I think that's a good place to do it. And one of the sites that we built, and it was code, but I'll show it to you because I think it answers, I think, what you're trying to do. So this is our location directory. And I want to kind of show off, I think it's pretty cool. So I can go through and I can say, let's go search for United States. And this is actually a search-based solution. So everything that you're looking here, these are pages and these are search results that come back in a custom web part at the front end. And then I can go through and I can grab any one of these different things. And I can say, let's go look at the summary page for it. And you can see this is the page for United States. And this is kind of exactly what I think your customer is looking for, where I have this like template built page that's automatically generated. And I'm just going to show you kind of what lives in here. So inside site pages, I've got a whole bunch of pages that are generated that have a bunch of data about them. And if I were to go look at any one of these, let's go view the details on it. If I look at it, I've got a bunch of metadata on each one of these. So you can see I created a content type for it called a page locations building that just inherits from a site page. And you've got a bunch of different properties on it. And we're using search to be able to filter all of these things down, right? So if you see it, I've got a bunch of these pages that are all templated, that are all created inside here. And in fact, those are all powered off of a SharePoint list. So there's a couple of folks in our facilities team who maintain these, and literally there's a list of 264 buildings. And all that they do is they go in here and they say, here's all the buildings, and they maintain the data inside the SharePoint list. And then they have a button on the Pages library, I believe, that I'm not going to click, that will go through and will automatically regenerate all of these 100% automatically for you. So it uses all of the metadata that's in here. Oh, right here, update pages. So if I click on update pages, it's going to go through and it's literally going to, based on the items in the list, which you could think of as generated by your form as an example, it'll go through and create and update all the pages.
Interesting. Okay.
Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
It's a very different way than I would think of it, but yeah. So you could have the form. You would basically have the form populate a SharePoint list and then use a search part to display that SharePoint list.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, basically, when I click that update pages, it runs an Azure function that says for every item inside the list, go through and generate a page, and it knows, in code how to go generate that page and put stuff in the right place. As I said, that's not a no-code thing, because there's unfortunately there's not a no-code way to do page generation, like a mail merge kind of thing. You can generate pages using PNP. What I might point you to, that I think if you ever want to go down this, it is called, let's see, Modern SharePoint. Oh, I can type SharePoint and maintenance mode. Have you seen this before?
No.
I always misspell it. That's why I Google for it. Let's see if I can find it. Instructions for, no. Did I spell it well enough? Yes, I did. Here we go. So let's go to any modern page just to show you this. This is actually pretty cool magic. So I'll go to my homepage over here and do !, maintenance mode equals true. And what you will see is now this is sort of like the behind the scenes dump of everything on here. So you have a news web part, and here's the data in ugly JSON form. If you want to do automation around it, this is basically what you need in order to say, here's how my news web part is configured. Here's how my content rollup web part is configured. So you're sort of peeking behind the curtain as to what's actually stored for your beautiful modern SharePoint page that you created with no code.
Awesome.
I'm going to put maintenance mode inside the chat window as well. I use a third-party ISV thing. I'm not plugging them in any way, called Power 365 to do page generation. And you can literally go through and say, I want to make a new page and put the news web part here. And here's the JSON that I want to go configure it. And so I use this to go off and grab the JSON for set up the page the way you want it, grab the JSON, and then say, go make me a new page, put the web part here, and this is the data that I want. And you can do like little placeholders to say, instead use this list ID, and put this title on, and be able to put it all together. But if you're doing any sort of page automation, this is the key move that you need, is the ability to go see all the guts behind it.
Cool.
Sorry, unfortunately, that's not no code.
Any whispers around Microsoft for them coming up with a solution for that that's less code?
Yeah, I don't know. As of right now, it's a PNP thing. I mean, I think there's the dream of save site as template, and that maybe one day that'll get back. But I'm not sure. They've got a huge amount on their plate with what they're doing with lists, with what they're doing with search, with what they're doing with Cortex. Those feel like they're the biggest kind of centers of gravity that I'm hearing and seeing about.
I can definitely see a value of generated pages using a mail merge technique that would absolutely be fascinating, or have just one page that is a mail merge, and dependent upon either a search or a click of the item, automatically grabbing that information and
Yeah.
re-altering the page.
I mean, if you guys are ever looking to do that, I'm happy to share the code we did to generate those locations pages that I showed you. Like, there's nothing sensitive inside there, and it's at least a getting started point if you ever want to do it. But I will kind of warn it. You know, it was built by Scott Hillier, so he's definitely smarter than I am when it comes to coding. And
we know Scott very well.
Yeah, exactly. So I give him all credit for that. If you ever want to go poke at that thing.
There is another question from Catherine Alexander. How do you first day with my new mouth? Sorry about that. How do you document your customizations?
That's a good question. I actually have a Word doc that I use basically for a lot of the solutions that we build that generates. I would say it's like 20 pages of questions. Everything from disaster recovery stuff, because sometimes I have dependencies that are in Azure and things like that, like how sensitive is it? What's my business continuity stuff? You know, where's the source code live if I've got source code and stuff like that. I mean, for stuff that is purely living inside SharePoint, I think it's a little bit easier. Like usually you'll have, you know, a doc that's inside the document library that goes with it, or I would say 50% of the time people don't leave a lot of documentation behind on it. But usually it's really, what do you transition to whoever's going to go support it, and what's the best thing that works for them. In terms of training end users, I try to do it all on that help site.
What? Not the site notebook?
I haven't used that for documentation in a long time, but it's a great option.
I was only half being sarcastic. I'm joking around, but one of the things that came up during my office hours was OneNote, and the utilization of OneNote because a lot of people completely forget every time you create an Office 365 group, lo and behold, because you got a SharePoint site behind it, there is a OneNote behind it. So and it's all basically preference of your company, your culture, Catherine. If it's something that's new or it's just not being done yet, it's something that you should probably actually raise a standard, a battle standard, if you will, or battle cry, and raise the flag and say, let's do this. And maybe you do suggest using, for all the customizations you do on your Office 365 group, just make sure you throw a how-to in your site notebook, so that way, if you win the lottery and become a towel girl in Tahiti for the rest of your life, someone behind you can actually get that done. Oh, you like that, Dave? That's a plagiarism, by the way.
Awesome. I always use win the lottery, but yeah, it's great.
I've actually got a content type that we toss around called change control. And it's just a SharePoint list item. So in lots of different sites, we'll just create a list, and then we can just insert the content type of change control. And it's got things like why the change was made, what the previous setting was, what the next setting was. So it's more oriented towards kind of administrative sort of settings changes and not customizations, but real lightweight tweaking, and you could use something like that for customizations as well.
Absolutely. So hopefully it sounds like the questions are starting to slow down a little bit.
Yes, they are. But at the same time, Dave, you covered so much information. I think half their faces are melted off from information overload.
It was very wide, but not very deep, is how I would describe this session. Because to me, like, the biggest challenge that I think people have is that they get a hammer and then everything looks like a nail. And I'm hoping that if anything, what this session did was it showed you, hey, there's a giant toolbox inside Microsoft 365, and that we can choose any of the different pieces inside here and build out some pretty compelling stuff without having to go write code every time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's real easy to get tunnel vision when it comes to Office 365.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I have such an appreciation for the Office 365 assistance time block that we have at Staples, because it's no longer office hours, it's a community. And it's not just me saying what's possible. Everyone's bringing things to the table now because we're 3 years into those office hours. And so a lot of people have different ideas and they start feeding off each other. And Dave Feldman and Mike Dixon, you definitely can probably agree to this statement. Back in the day when it was just SharePoint, I don't care how deep you were into it, there was no way you would be able to know everything there was to know about SharePoint. Now, being an quote unquote Office 365 engineer, expert, guru, whatever you want to throw at the end of that, there's even less chance of you knowing everything there is to know about it. There's too much. There's way too much. And that's why community is such a valuable asset.
Agreed.
I agree. Thank you guys so much for building this great community and for hosting me tonight.
Thank you for coming and speaking. I know you got a busy schedule, Dave, but at the same time, that was absolutely awesome stuff. A lot of people are interested in the no-code solutions. I think you can probably equate that to back in the day when we were talking mashups. I'm sure you remember the mashups with creating multiple lists, using a web part page, and using the ability to actually have the web parts to throw filters at one another to create these mashups. Again, no code solutions, but a little bit more wonky. So this is like the next generation, if you will, and you were actually willing to try to tackle it, and that was very much appreciated.
My pleasure, Dave.
Awesome. Mike, do you want to continue onwards?
Sure. Let me see if I can pull up the deck.
Mike, I have the deck in front of me. Let me share my screen.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
So upcoming events. So we have the Microsoft Ignite conference coming up in just a few short weeks. Microsoft has taken this to be an online-only format, and from what I've seen, it sounds like it also might be a cost-free event, but don't quote me on that. As far as I can see, registration is not yet open, but keep an eye on this URL, and that should you should be able to get the latest details there. I'm not sure if anyone's here that has attended the Microsoft Partner Conference that took place about a month ago, but it was also in a pure virtual format, and I think they did a pretty good job pulling it off. Other upcoming events, there's a monthly Women IT Pros call, Sevilla AKMS/Women IT Pros. If anyone has any other events that they know are coming up that might be of interest to this group, please feel free to put that into the chat window. All right, so moving forward, we also want to talk about some of our sister and brother groups, though that might also be of interest. So we have the Rhode Island SharePoint user group that also meets once a month, hosted by our friend DRC. We have the Hartford user group hosted by Jared Mathis, and Jared is actually going to be presenting a session here with us in November, so definitely keep an eye out for that. We have the Granite State user group that also meets once a month. We have Julie Turner and Jim Wilcox running that one. And there's a few other ones in the area that that don't purely align with O365, but close enough. So definitely check them out if any of these spark your interest. If you have any other user groups that you're aware of that overlap with what we do here, please do let us know, and we'll be happy to add them to the slide. So that being said, we are looking for speakers for next month's session. We're talking to a few tentative speakers, but if you know anyone that's interested, or you yourself could present something about how your organization is using O365, please reach out and let us know. In any case, we will be hosting the next session on September 17th, same time, same place. So we hope you can join us then. So before we go into the raffle, just kind of, this is a user group, so you are our members, you are the community here. So does anyone have any tips or tricks, or is anyone hiring or looking for work? At this point in the session, feel free to unmute yourselves, and we can have a little bit of an open discussion.
Hey everyone, it's Chrissy. Hey Dimitri, I have one little tip that was actually a gotcha that I encountered. It's really, really small, but when you're adding a SharePoint list to a SharePoint page, as a web part, make sure you actually save the page first before you republish it, because I encountered a really weird gotcha. I don't know if it's actually maybe what do you call them? Oh shoot, brain freeze. Well, anyhow, that if you just go ahead and republish it with that before saving it, it actually saves the list in edit quick view mode, as opposed to just the list mode. So just a little, it was like I'm not sure if it's a bug or not, but what I saw that was a workaround is that if you save the page first and then publish it, you don't run into that issue.
Oh, that's an interesting tip. Thanks, Chrissy.
Yeah, it was really weird. I'm not sure if it was just a correlation or causation, but the fact that I saved it then published it, it fixed the issue. So who knows?
All right. I see a message from Robert in the chat window. Whatever happened to the group that hosted SharePoint Saturday? So SharePoint Saturday has been run by Julie Turner from the New Hampshire Spug, as well as our friend Mark Anderson. They typically would run it in the fall, and we had a pretty good SharePoint Saturday last, I believe it was November or so. But that being said, there's also the SharePoint user group, which merged with us as part of the Boston O365 user group about a year ago as well. So we haven't heard anything about whether or not there might be a virtual Boston Spug coming this fall, but we'll certainly be the first to report it if we do hear about that.
Great, thank you. I used to enjoy going to those, so it was those were great resources.
Yeah, like a few of the cities, like I believe it was Philadelphia a couple of Saturdays ago, they hosted one virtually, and from what I hear, it was a pretty good success. So we might see if more and more decide to do that.
And Dimitri, hey, it's Chrissy again. I'm not sure if you saw it in the chat. I did post another event that's coming up, and it's actually a virtual event because we are still in the midst of the pandemic. It's the M365 Global Virtual Community, and the launch party is coming up. I think it's either the 27th or the 28th of this month. If you follow either Galen, Joel, or Jeff on either on LinkedIn or Twitter, they've been broadcasting out that event. So I posted actually the homepage link to that. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy. Is anyone hiring or looking for work? All right. So moving forward, just once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor for helping make this group possible. So we have a couple of raffle items. We have a $25 Amazon